Dagenham, Essex. September 1942. A man named George Patchett walked into a room at the Sterling Armaments factory, placed a prototype submachine gun on a table in front of a British Army Ordnance Board, and made a claim that sounded, at the time, almost impolite. He told them he had built something better than the Sten. This was not a modest claim. The Sten was everywhere. 4 million of them had been built or were being built. They were in the hands of British infantrymen on every front. They were being parachuted in crates to resistance fighters across occupied Europe. Winston Churchill had been photographed holding one on the cliffs of Dover. Saying the Sten was inadequate was not just a technical observation. It was a challenge to an institution that had staked enormous resources on a weapon it could not easily unstake. Patchett was right, and proving it would take him 9 years. The weapon he eventually produced, the Sterling Mk-4, the L2A3, would go on to serve Britain for 40 years. Across every conflict the British military fought, from the Suez crisis to the Falklands. It would equip the SAS in Northern Ireland and Oman in its suppressed form, quiet enough that the loudest sound was the bolt cycling. It would be adopted by more than 50 nations. It would arm both sides of a war in the South Atlantic simultaneously, and it would become, without a single person at Sterling Armaments planning for it or profiting from it, the most visually recognized submachine gun on Earth, carried by Imperial Stormtroopers across the entire Star Wars original trilogy, firing real blank 9mm cartridges at Harrison Ford on the stages of Elstree Studios in 1976. All of that from a weapon born in a Dagenham factory to solve one specific problem: the curved magazine that fed without complaint. Everything else followed from that. Britain's relationship with the Sten is complicated in the particular way that wartime necessity always complicates things. Dunkirk had cost the British Army approximately 68,000 rifles, around 28,000 machine guns, and essentially the entire inventory of automatic weapons the BEF had taken to France. Britain, in the summer of 1940, was, in terms of infantry firepower, effectively disarmed. What was needed was a submachine gun that could be built in enormous numbers, immediately, from whatever materials were available. Major Reginald Shepherd and Harold Turpin produced the Sten in 9 days. The cost of the first production models was £2.50. The Thompson submachine gun Britain had been importing from America cost £45 each. At £2.50, the Sten could be made in bicycle factories, machine shops, car repair garages, anywhere with basic metalworking equipment. By the end of the war, over 4 million had been produced. The Sten worked. That is the most honest thing that can be said about it. In the minimum required sense, it fired 9mm rounds in the direction it was pointed. With meaningful frequency, it did what it was asked to do. The limitations were nonetheless real and consistently documented. The double-column, single-feed magazine copied from the German Mk-4 required both columns of ammunition to converge into a single-feed position at the top. Any accumulation of dirt, any slight deformation of the magazine body would cause the follower to bind and the feed to fail. The failure rate under field conditions was high enough that soldiers developed workarounds that were incorporated into the official training manual. A weapon whose training manual includes instructions on how not to cause its own most common malfunction is a weapon whose most common malfunction is taken for granted. The second problem was accidental discharge. If dropped onto a hard surface with the bolt cocked rearward, the bolt's inertia could carry it forward past the safety notch, strip around, and fire it. No trigger pull required, documented in training accidents throughout the Sten's service. The problem was managed, never solved. The third problem was the spring. The single recoil spring was marginal. Under sustained fire, it weakened. In cold conditions, it stiffened. At both extremes, it produced inconsistent cycling, the category of malfunction most difficult to clear under fire. In the Norwegian campaign and in the airborne operations of Northwest Europe, the Sten's spring was a known vulnerability. Patchett worked for the company that had been building Lanchester submachine guns for the Royal Navy, a weapon machined from solid steel to the standard of a peacetime service rifle, so expensive to manufacture that nobody except the Royal Navy could afford it. Patchett understood the full range of what a submachine gun could be, from the Lanchester's excessive precision to the Sten's minimal adequacy, and his design ambition was to find the space between those two extremes. The bolt was his first innovation. In late 1943, Patchett patented a helical groove, spiraling around the entire exterior of the bolt body. As the bolt cycled back and forward under fire approximately 9 times per second on automatic, the spiral grooves physically scraped mud, carbon fouling, and debris off the interior surface of the receiver with every stroke. A Sten bolt running inside a dirty receiver would eventually slow and fail. A Patchett bolt running inside the same receiver was cleaning it as it fired, tolerating contamination versus eliminating it mechanically. A fundamental difference in what the designer believed about the conditions his weapon would face. The magazine was the second innovation, and it was the one that mattered most. Patchett designed a curved 34-round magazine, curved because 9mm parabellum naturally tends toward curvature when stacked in a double column, and fighting that tendency rather than accommodating it was the root of the Sten magazine's problems. But the detail that elevated this magazine from good to exceptional was the follower. Instead of a flat steel plate pushing cartridges upward, Patchett installed 2 small bearing rollers. The rollers rotated freely against the magazine walls as the follower rose, reducing friction to essentially nothing. The cartridges fed consistently, every time, under conditions that caused the Sten magazine's flat follower to bind and stop. Evaluators who tested the Sterling throughout its development and service life returned to the same description of that magazine repeatedly: the finest submachine gun magazine ever designed. That claim has not been seriously challenged in the 7 decades since. The third problem, the spring, was addressed by 1950 with a dual spring arrangement. A smaller spring nested concentrically inside a larger one. The dual springs increased cycling energy, improved consistency at temperature extremes, and eliminated the cold weather failures the single spring had produced. 3 specific problems. 3 specific solutions. No wasted engineering. Every design decision traceable to a documented failure mode of the weapon it was replacing. The Army issued its formal specification in 1944. No more than 6 pounds unloaded, 9mm parabellum, rate of fire no higher than 500 rounds per minute, 5 consecutive shots inside a 1-foot square target at 100 yards. 20 Patchett machine carbines were delivered in April 1944. The assessment was immediately positive. A further 100 were ordered. Feedback from soldiers who had carried Stens into combat was not ambiguous. This was what the Sten should have been. It should have entered service in 1944 or 45. It did not. The Army looked at its warehouses full of Stens, 4 million of them at £2.50 each, and made the institutional calculation that organizations always make when the existing inventory is vast and the replacement costs money. The Sten was free, in the sense that it had already been paid for. The Patchett won its trials. Then it waited. Competitive trials in 1947 were inconclusive. More development. More trials. The decision came in 1951. Production began in 1953 as the L2. A1, the Sterling, named after the company in Dagenham. The name of the designer who had spent 9 years bringing the weapon from prototype to service disappeared into the designation. George Patchett's name appears on the patents. It does not appear on the weapon. Service began in 1953, 7 years after the troop trials that had confirmed it was ready. 7 years during which the men who could have been carrying it were still carrying Stens. The L2A3, the Sterling Mk-4, arrived in 1956 and became the definitive form. Weight 2.7 kilograms unloaded. Length 686 millimeters, with stock extended 481 millimeters folded. 34-round curved roller magazine. Rate of fire, 550 rounds per minute, deliberately moderate, chosen for controllability over volume. The side-mounted magazine kept the weapon close to the ground in the prone position, a detail that mattered where being 6 inches lower was the difference between taking fire and avoiding it. The reload required a lateral movement rather than a straight drop, a pattern that had to be trained to muscle memory. The weapon rewarded thorough training and was honest about demanding it. The first extended operational test came in Malaya. The emergency ran from 1948 to 1960. Jungle heat degraded lubricants. Humidity caused corrosion. Mud infiltrated every opening. Operations lasted days without the opportunity to clean a weapon properly. The gap between a weapon that claimed reliability and one that actually delivered it was immediately measurable in outcomes. The Sterling delivered. The helical bolt cleaned itself under cycling. The roller magazine fed without complaint regardless of contamination. The Sterling's reputation did not come from one dramatic moment. It came from 1,000 ordinary moments in which the weapon worked when it needed to, without requiring the operator to perform any special ritual to make it cooperate. It simply functioned. Suez followed in 1956. British paratroopers dropping into Port Said carried the Sterling in urban fighting at close quarters, where 481mm folded mattered as much as reliability. A soldier clearing a room does not need range. He needs 34 rounds, controllable fire, and a weapon that responds to the trigger with the consistency training has built around. The Sterling was that weapon. Then Northern Ireland. The Troubles began in 1969 and ran for 30 years. No other environment tested the Sterling more consistently over a longer period in a more operationally complex context. Soldiers in Belfast and Londonderry and Armagh were not fighting at distances where the rifle's range advantage was decisive. Vehicle crews carried the Sterling because a self-loading rifle over a meter long cannot be brought out of a Land Rover quickly in a contact. Undercover surveillance operators needed something that could be carried in a jacket. The plainclothes teams conducting the most sensitive intelligence operations in Northern Ireland needed a weapon that could deliver meaningful automatic fire in the close quarters contacts that surveillance operations sometimes became. The suppressed variant had existed since 1966. The L-34A1, the Sterling Mark V, used a ported barrel surrounded by an integral suppressor housing. Ports drilled along the barrel's length vented propellant gases into expansion chambers where they expanded, cooled, and lost velocity before exiting as a dispersed, slow-moving flow rather than a concentrated, high-pressure blast. Firing subsonic 9mm ammunition, the result was described by users as barely louder than a staple gun. The loudest sound in the firing sequence was the mechanical noise of the bolt cycling. The SAS used it in Northern Ireland. The SBS used it. The Australian and New Zealand SAS regiments used the suppressed Sterling in Vietnam. When the HK Mk-4 became available, and the transition began in the late 1970s, the suppressed Sterling was retained alongside its replacement. The organizations that had used it were not in a hurry to give it up. Argentina had purchased Sterling submachine guns through the export program that had taken the weapon to more than 50 nations. And in April 1982, that export history produced one of the more operationally strange symmetries in modern British military history. Argentine Navy commandos in the Falklands carried the L-34, A1 suppressed Sterling. British Special Forces in the Falklands carried the L-34, A1 suppressed Sterling. The same weapon from the same factory in Dagenham on both sides of the same conflict. At the same moment, in the same landscape, in operations that in some cases brought operators on opposite sides of that symmetry into direct contact. The standard L2A3 served with British infantry throughout the campaign at Goose Green, Mount Longdon Wireless Ridge. Compact, reliable, 34 rounds, fold it and get it out of the way, unfold it, and it works. Patchett's brief, from 1942, a weapon better than the Sten had been fulfilled so completely that 4 decades later it was still what British soldiers were taking into a major conventional conflict in the conflict. South Atlantic. And then the Stormtroopers. George Lucas was making Star Wars in 1976 and 1977 at Elstree Studios in Hertfordshire. The budget made custom-built futuristic prop weapons impractical. The production designer looked at what was available from British film armourers Bapty and Company. The Sterling was a current British Army service weapon, available, reliable on a film set with blank ammunition. A barrel shroud over the muzzle, a shorter magazine, the folding stock folded forward or removed. A Second World War Sherman tank periscope scoped the M38 model mounted above the receiver. A Hengstler Corporation industrial mechanical counter attached behind the magazine housing. The result was the Blastech E11 blaster rifle, the weapon issued to every Imperial Stormtrooper in the original trilogy. The Sterlings used in A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back were fully functional firearms firing 9mm blank cartridges. In several scenes during the assault on the Death Star detention level, expended 9mm cases can be seen ejecting from the props. The sound effects team built the blaster sound around the real firing sound of the blank rounds. The entire visual and auditory identity of the Imperial Stormtrooper weapon in the most commercially successful film franchise in history is built on a Sterling Mk-4 L2A3 manufactured in Dagenham. Every child who watched Star Wars from 1977 onwards was watching a Sterling Mk-4. Every person who has ever built a replica E11, worn a Stormtrooper costume, or recognized that silhouette has been engaging with a submachine gun designed in Dagenham in 1942 by a man who wanted to build something better than the Sten. More people have seen the Sterling than have ever heard its name. That is not a distinction many weapons achieve. The Sterling was retired from British Army General Issue in 1994. Sterling Armaments had gone into administration in 1988. The company went bankrupt 6 years before the Army finished using what it had made. George Patchett died in 1987, 1 year before the bankruptcy, watching the entire operational life of something he had built without ever seeing his name on it. The L2A3, said Sterling. It said Dagenham. It did not say Patchett. It started as one designer's specific, unglamorous answer to a weapon that wartime desperation had made ubiquitous. A curved magazine with roller bearings where a flat follower had failed. A self-cleaning bolt where an ordinary one had fouled. Dual springs where a single marginal spring had weakened. It waited 9 years in trials, while the institution it was designed to serve issued men something worse. It served from 1953 to 1994 across Malaya, Suez, Aden, Borneo, Northern Ireland, Oman, and the Falklands. It equipped the SAS, the SBS, and the soldiers of more than 50 nations. It appeared on both sides of the same war in both its standard and suppressed forms. And wearing a tank scope and a Hengstler counter, it became the most recognizable submachine gun silhouette in history without a single person in the audience knowing its name. The Sterling Mk-4 is not feared because it was revolutionary. It is feared because it was exactly right, every decision traceable to a specific failure it had been built to correct, every component doing precisely what it was designed to do, for 40 years, in every environment Britain sent soldiers into, without drama, without failure, without requiring the men who carried it to manage its inadequacies in the moments when inadequacies cost lives. George Patchett built it to be better than the Sten. It was better than everything that came after it as well. The 34-round roller magazine, feeding without complaint in a jungle, a back street in Belfast, or on a film stage in Hertfordshire, knew that from the first day it left Dagenham. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and check out the next video right here.